My yacht, Euphoria, was my sanctuary, a place where I could escape the madness of the world. At 68, with billions in the bank, I thought I'd experienced everything life had to offer. But that day, something extraordinary happened. When I boarded, expecting nothing more than my usual solitude, I was greeted by the new crew, including a young waiter whose presence would soon change my life forever. His name was Ethan. I first saw him while he was setting the dining table on the main deck. He was striking, tall, muscular, with jet-black hair that shone in the sunlight and piercing green eyes that seemed to hide the mysteries of the ocean. His smooth skin caught the golden light just right, and his presence was magnetic, impossible to ignore. "Welcome aboard, Mr. Laurent. May I get you anything?" His voice was calm but authoritative, carrying a warmth that went straight to my core. I nodded in response, offering a polite reply, but as I walked away, I couldn't shake the feeling that my heart was racing, a sensation I hadn't experienced in years. Throughout the day, I caught myself stealing glances at him, intrigued by his effortless grace. Every movement seemed deliberate, yet natural, an ideal blend of poise and confidence. Ethan stood out not just because of his looks, but because of an aura that drew people in without him even trying. That evening, as the sun sank beneath the horizon, Ethan served my dinner. He handled every detail with meticulous care, but it was the way he held my gaze that left me captivated. His green eyes sparkled as if they saw right through me, and I felt an inexplicable connection forming between us. Later, as I sat alone on the upper deck, gazing at the endless sea, I realized something had shifted within me. For the first time in decades, I felt alive. For the first time in decades, I felt alive. Ethan had awakened a part of me I thought was long dead. What I didn't know was that this was only the beginning of a story that would lead to both ecstasy and heartbreak, ultimately changing the course of my life forever. The following morning, as I sipped my coffee on the main deck, I couldn't help but notice Ethan polishing crystal glasses nearby. His movements were deliberate yet effortless, his posture straight and confident. The sunlight highlighted his dark hair, and his green eyes seemed even more vibrant in the early light. There was something about him that drew me in, something I couldn't ignore, no matter how hard I tried. Finally, I decided to strike up a conversation. "Ethan," I began, trying to sound casual but failing to mask the curiosity in my voice. "You seem young to be working on a luxury yacht. How did you end up here?" He turned to me with a shy smile, the kind that felt genuine and disarming. "I grew up in a small town," he replied, his voice steady but tinged with nostalgia. "I've always dreamed of seeing the world, and this job felt like the first step toward something bigger." His honesty caught me off guard. There was a vulnerability in his words that contrasted with his composed demeanor, and I found myself wanting to know more about him. We spoke for a while longer, and with every word my fascination deepened. He spoke passionately about his dreams and the challenges he'd faced, and I couldn't help but admire his resilience. Our interactions became more frequent after that. Whenever I was on the deck, it seemed Ethan found an excuse to be nearby. Though he remained professional, there were moments when his gaze lingered just a second longer than necessary, leaving me wondering if he felt the same unspoken tension I did. One afternoon, I invited him for a ride in one of the yacht's tenders. He hesitated at first, but eventually agreed, his smile betraying a hint of excitement. As we glided across the turquoise waters, our conversation flowed effortlessly. It felt as if we had known each other for years, despite the vast differences in our lives. That evening, as I stood on the deck watching the sunset, I couldn't help but replay our conversations in my mind. There was something undeniably special about Ethan, something that made me want to explore the connection between us further. But I knew taking that step would come with risk. The days that followed were filled with a mixture of excitement and apprehension. Ethan had become an integral part of my daily life, and I couldn't ignore the way he made me feel. There was a spark between us, an undeniable chemistry that I hadn't felt in decades. But the fear of rejection and the complications of our circumstances kept me from acting on my feelings. One evening, as the stars blanketed the sky, I found Ethan adjusting lights on the main deck. The glow of the moon highlighted his chiseled features, making him look almost otherworldly. Gathering my courage, I approached him, my heart pounding in my chest. "Ethan," I began, my voice trembling slightly, "do you ever think about what you truly want in life? Your dreams? Your desires?" He turned to face me, his green eyes locking onto mine. "Mr. Laurent," he said softly, "I've thought about it a lot. I've always wanted to be part of something bigger, something meaningful. And being here, it feels like I'm on the right path." His words resonated deeply with me. For the first time, I felt that perhaps we were searching for the same thing, a connection that transcended the superficial. Without thinking, I placed my hand on his shoulder and said, "Maybe you're exactly where you're meant to be." Ethan held my gaze, and in that moment, the unspoken tension between us became almost unbearable. But instead of crossing the line, we both hesitated, each of us unsure of the other's true feelings. That night, as I lay awake in my cabin, I couldn't stop thinking about him. Every glance, every word, every touch replayed in my mind. I knew I had to take the next step, no matter the consequences. For the first time in years, I felt alive, and I wasn't willing to let that feeling slip away. The days following that night were a whirlwind of emotions. I could no longer ignore the truth. I was falling for Ethan. Every moment spent in his presence felt like a gift, and every glance or fleeting touch stirred something deep within me. Yet, the weight of our differences hung heavy in the air. My age, my wealth, and my position made it almost unthinkable to pursue anything beyond our professional relationship. But love, or at least what I believe to be love, is not rational. One afternoon, as we cruised through the calm waters of the Mediterranean, I decided to take a leap of faith. I invited Ethan to join me for dinner on the private upper deck. It was a place reserved for my most intimate moments, and inviting him there was my way of signaling that this was more than just a casual conversation. Ethan arrived, looking polished yet effortlessly charming in a crisp white shirt. His green eyes sparkled under the deck lights, and his shy but confident smile sent my heart racing. The meal was exquisite, but it was the conversation that made the night unforgettable. We talked about our lives, our dreams, and the things that kept us awake at night. As the dinner wound down, I knew I couldn't keep my feelings bottled up any longer. "Ethan," I said, my voice trembling, "since the day I met you, you've brought something into my life that I thought was gone forever. You've made me feel alive again." He stared at me, stunned, but not unkindly. After a moment, he replied, "Mr. Laurent. Laurent, I don't know what to say, but I feel it too. There's something here, something I've never felt before." His use of my first name, without the formality, felt like the final barrier between us had crumbled. That night, under a sky full of stars, we shared our first kiss. It was tender, hesitant, but it marked the beginning of something neither of us could deny. Our relationship flourished in secret. Ethan remained professional around the crew, but when we were alone, he was an entirely different person. Loving, attentive, and full of warmth. I hadn't felt this kind of happiness in decades. He had reignited a fire in me that I thought had long since burned out. As the weeks passed, I realized I wanted more. It wasn't enough to share stolen moments in the privacy of my yacht. I wanted to build a life with him, to give him the kind of stability and security he deserved. And so, one evening during a trip to Capri, I did something I never thought I would do again. I proposed. The moment was perfect. We were on a secluded beach, the sun dipping below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. I took his hand, looked into his mesmerizing green eyes, and said, "Ethan, you've given me a reason to believe in love again. Will you marry me?" For a moment, he looked as though he might cry. Then, with a radiant smile, he said, "Yes, Laurent. I want to spend my life with you." Our wedding was a private but lavish affair, attended by a handful of close friends and family. Ethan looked stunning in his tailored suit, and I couldn't help but feel like the luckiest man alive. For the first time in years, I felt whole. I trusted him completely. So much so, that I signed over significant portions of my assets to him as a gesture of my commitment. At the time, it felt like the right thing to do. Proof that I was all in. Little did I know, I was setting the stage for my own downfall. Not long after the wedding, I began to notice small but troubling changes. Ethan, who had once been so open and present, started to become distant. He took calls in private, stepping away whenever his phone buzzed. When I asked, he brushed it off, saying it was business-related or a friend checking in. Around the same time, I started experiencing an inexplicable fatigue. At first, I attributed it to the stress of wedding planning and the whirlwind of emotions that came with it. But as the days turned into weeks, the exhaustion became harder to ignore. My energy waned, and even simple tasks left me drained. Ethan seemed genuinely concerned, urging me to see a doctor. His care and attentiveness reassured me, but there was a nagging feeling I couldn't shake. Something about the timing of everything felt off, though I couldn't quite put my finger on it. One evening, my oldest friend, Thomas, paid me a visit. He had always been protective of me, and his sharp intuition made him skeptical of Ethan from the start. Over a glass of scotch, he said, "Laurent, I know you're happy, but are you sure you can trust him? Something about this feels calculated." Thomas's words planted a seed of doubt, but I brushed it aside. Ethan had shown me nothing but kindness and devotion. Still, the idea lingered in the back of my mind, haunting me in quiet moments. My health deteriorated rapidly after the diagnosis. Each day felt heavier than the last as I struggled to accept my mortality. The once vibrant man who had ruled boardrooms and commanded fleets now relied on nurses and machines to keep going. My body was failing me, but worse than that was the emotional toll. Despite Ethan's constant presence, a seed of doubt had taken root in my heart. Ethan was attentive, always ensuring I had what I needed, yet there was a subtle change in his demeanor. His once bright and playful eyes seemed colder, more calculated. He stayed by my side during the day, but his nights were often spent on his phone or out on unexplained errands. I told myself that he was simply overwhelmed by the weight of my illness, but deep down, I knew something wasn't right. One night, as I lay in my hospital bed, I overheard Ethan speaking in hushed tones just outside the room. His words were clipped, his tone tense, but I couldn't make out the specifics. When he returned, I asked him about the call. He smiled and brushed it off, saying it was a lawyer handling estate matters. "I just want to make sure everything is seamless for you, Laurent," he said, his voice laced with what felt like genuine concern. Thomas visited me again, this time more insistent. "Laurent, I'm telling you, something about Ethan doesn't add up. He's too smooth, too perfect. I know you love him, but you need to protect yourself," he warned. His words struck a chord, but I was too exhausted to confront the truth. Ethan seemed to sense my growing unease, and his reassurances became more frequent. He would sit by my bed, holding my hand, whispering about our future together. "I'll take care of you, always," he promised, his green eyes shimmering with emotion. "You don't need to worry about a thing." But the worry wouldn't leave me. I began to reflect on our time together, piecing together small inconsistencies, unanswered questions, and the nagging feeling that I had been too quick to trust. Still, I couldn't bring myself to confront him. I wanted so desperately to believe in the love we had shared, even if it was built on a foundation of lies. My condition worsened to the point where the doctors informed me there was little more they could do. Ethan, with tears in his eyes, begged me to sign the final papers, transferring full control of my estate to him. "Laurent, I need to know that everything is in order. You deserve peace," he said, his voice breaking. Against my better judgment, I signed. I wanted to trust him. I needed to trust him. As my final days approached, the reality of my situation began to sink in. I was dying, and everything I had built over decades would soon be out of my hand. But the love I thought I had found in Ethan was the only thing that brought me solace. I clung to it, hoping that at least this one part of my life was real. Ethan remained a constant presence, holding my hand during painful treatments and whispering sweet words of encouragement when I felt like giving up. "You've been my rock, Lauren," he would say. "I don't know what I'll do without you." But the more he spoke, the more his words felt rehearsed, like lines from a script. One evening, as I lay in bed, too weak to move, I overheard another conversation between Ethan and someone on the phone. This time, I caught enough to confirm my worst fears. "Once the paperwork clears, we'll be set," he whispered, "just a little longer." My heart shattered. The man I had trusted with everything, my love, my legacy, my life, had been playing me all along. When Ethan returned, I confronted him with the last bit of strength I could muster. "Ethan," I rasped, my voice barely audible, "tell me the truth. Did you ever love me?" His face twisted with something between guilt and irritation. He hesitated, then knelt beside me. "Lauren," he began, his voice soft but detached. "At first, it was about the money. I won't lie to you, but somewhere along the way, I started to care about you. I really did." His words were a dagger to my heart. Even as I lay dying, he couldn't give me the full truth. I turned away, unable to look at him. My tears were silent, but my pain was immeasurable. The next day, I slipped into unconsciousness. Ethan stayed by my side, holding my hand and whispering words I could no longer hear. Whether they were apologies or empty reassurances, I'll never know. When I took my final breath, Ethan was there, his hands still clutching mine, to the outside world. He was the picture of a grieving husband, devastated by the loss of the man he loved. But behind closed doors, he wasted no time securing his newfound wealth. With my death, Ethan inherited everything. The mansion, the yachts, the business assets. All of it now belonged to him. The legal documents I had signed in my weakened state ensured there would be no challenges to his claim. He played the role of the mourning widower perfectly, winning the sympathy of everyone around him. Within weeks, Ethan moved into a sprawling estate in Miami, complete with a private beach and every luxury money could buy. He quickly surrounded himself with new friends, people drawn to his charm and wealth. To the public, he was a success story, a man who had found love late in life and tragically lost it. But behind the glamour and the smiles, Ethan knew exactly what he had done. He had planned everything from the start, carefully orchestrating each step to ensure his victory. And now he had it all. My fortune, my legacy, my life's work, all for himself. There were moments, I imagine, when the weight of his actions might have crossed his mind. Perhaps he thought of me, the man who had loved him unconditionally, even in the face of betrayal. But if he did, those thoughts were fleeting. Ethan had won, and he had no intention of looking back. Though I'm gone, my story remains, a cautionary tale of how blind love can lead to destruction. Ethan got everything he wanted, and in the end there was no justice, just the cold, hard truth. He had played the game perfectly, and I had been his pawn. Did you enjoy the story? This incredible tale was actually shared by one of our followers in the comments. On a scale of 1 to 10, how much do you think this story deserves? Leave your rating in the comments below. Also, if you have a story to share, something that's happened to you or someone you know, we'd love to hear it and turn it into a video for our channel. Don't hold back. Every story has the potential to inspire and captivate, and don't forget to subscribe to our channel to receive daily stories full of passion, gay romance, and unforgettable emotions that you'll only find here. Thank you so much for staying with us until the end, and we'll see you in the next video.